you start us off?
Yeah, Russ, I know you and Jimmy were really close during the time he was here. Just
Me
what
and
kind
who?
of
Sorry, you broke up.
sorry, I was asking about Jimmy Graham. I know
Okay,
you
yeah.
two were close. You built a really strong friendship. Just what's that relationship been like, and how it'll be to see him out there?
Yeah, Jimmy was as one of my best friends, man. He was in my wedding. Just a guy who was just a all-time classy dude. I know he's up for Man of the Year. We got a good guy with Tyler, and obviously a guy like Jimmy. Both great guys. I think what Jimmy meant to me is the first day I ever got to meet him was a tough day. In person, really. His mother figure, passed away, and I was in Miami to go see him, and he had just joined the team and everything else, and we bonded ever since. And I think that we've connected in so many different ways because my dad passed away. My dad Harrison, Tammy, his mother figure passed away, and we love the game. We're passionate about the game. We're passionate about trying to serve and everything else, and just so we've always connected on that sense, and love him to death, man. That's my guy.
Jen?
Russ, given where the offensive numbers are now and where they could be, what's the best way to get the offense on track in the last 3 weeks and to finish strong?
I think the best thing we can do is focus on today. I think that we have a lot of good things, good parts about us. There's some things that we can, tune up and just continue to battle with. We've played some great teams. We battled along the way. The other night's game was a tough game. It was all the way down to the wire. Fortunately, it didn't go the way we wanted it to. But I think that ultimately there's a lot of great things too. I think the 2 weeks before that we were rolling on offense, and so I think that we just got to stay the course. That's the biggest thing. Stay the course and continue to be great professionals about the game and how we're going to go about it.
Is there one thing in particular that helps you just either lock in or get more comfortable or help you feel back on track? Is there a play, a throw, something that just dials you in better than anything else?
I felt dialed in. Obviously the game didn't go the way we wanted it to, but I've been feeling dialed in the sense that the past two games before the other night, we were really making things happen, and I think this past game it was a tough battle against a really good football team, and it happens, and you wake up the next day and you just focus on the task. And the biggest thing I can do is always focus on the little things and continue to try to lead at the highest level, and that's all I know.
Jackie?
Hey Russ, looking at Chicago, Robert Quinn, the amount of sacks that he has this year, what has allowed him to be so effective?
I think Robert Quinn's always been one of the most dominant players in the league. He's a guy who knows how to get after the quarterback. He gets off the ball extremely well. He's got long arms, long legs. He can really maneuver well. We have a great left tackle in Dwayne Brown to be able to try to slow him down. But he's a great football player, obviously, in Robert Quinn. He's had one of his best years. He's had some amazing years in the past, and I've had to go against him a bunch over the years. When he was playing with St. Louis and all that. So he's a tremendous football player, and he knows how to do it. We used to play against each other all the way back in the UNC days too. So I know a lot about Robert Quinn.
Thank you.
Yep.
Masvita?
Yeah. Hey, Russell, a lot's been talked about in terms of the offense not getting enough reps early on in the game, and part of that is due to third down. How much of emphasis then do you all put on first and second down to kind of shorten the chains for the third down conversion?
Well, I think anytime you can be super efficient on first and second down, that's always helpful. I think the other night's game, we only had one drive in the first quarter. That's hard football, and just in the sense of not getting enough time of possession in that sense. But we had a pretty good drive. They stopped it on a good screen. Aaron Donald made a good play on the screen, and next thing you know, it was middle of the second quarter basically. So, I think that for us, first and second down efficiency, making key plays, moving the ball, that's any offense. You really want to be able to be really efficient there in the run and pass game, and I think that's always helpful to keep those third and shorts. And anytime you get to third and longs, third and tens and pluses, that's always tough. And so trying to stay out of those and trying to keep it in close distances and make our plays when we can.
Art?
Russell, a question about the COVID testing in the NFL now. They've changed the policy to go from everybody gets a test once a week to a few guys get randomly selected for testing. And given how adversely you guys were impacted by the Rams breakout in terms of the scheduling, does that make sense to you to test less now instead of being more vigilant?
I think it's a great question. I think that obviously being safe as possible is what makes sense, and I think wearing our mask, really trying to be really careful, especially in the holiday season. Family members come into town, making sure that family members are getting tested, loved ones, friends, all that. I think that's how we've done a really good job, over this long haul here over the past 2 years of being really safe and continuing that. I think the best thing we can do too is protect one another. Obviously, we're in virtual meetings a bunch and everything else, and so I think to answer your question, Art, I think the testing is definitely definitely super important, and obviously even when you are testing, things can happen, and I think it's this thing's been very diligent, getting after our loved ones and friends and our community, and so we have to be really careful to protect one another. I think the best thing we can do is just try to stay safe as possible, wear our mask, wash our hands, all the little things, and even when that happens, not everything's going to go perfect. So I think the best thing that we can do here is try to do all the protocols that we can in every way. Obviously, this thing's getting a little ramped up a little bit here, and we got to be really careful, and we got to protect everybody.
Greg.
Are you still testing almost every day at home, Russ?
Yeah, I test quite a bit, along the journey. So, I think that it's really important that we all remain safe, and and obviously, I got Sierra at home and the kids and everything else. So, it's super important that we keep doing that, and our family and stuff.
When you returned in Green Bay November 14th, how long after that did you feel effects from returning? Whether it's the finger or the rust of having not played?
Did I feel what?
How long did you feel the effects of being off? Whether it was the finger itself or the fact you didn't play for a month. How many games after Green Bay did you have a lingering effect, do you think, from being out?
Yeah, I think going into Green Bay, I think it was obviously it's a tough environment. It's a battle to the fourth quarter. The score is, I think, 3-0. Not everything was perfect on either side. We're trying to make things happen. Mentally, completely engaged, and physically too. I told you guys, I've played dinged up before. I've played, with injuries and things, and not everything goes perfect. It's just, I think that's what you have to do, along the way. Was 100%? Definitely not, but I think at the same time, you go out there and you learn as much as you can learn and play as hard as you can and try to help us win, and unfortunately didn't go that way. But so I would say, really felt good, really probably that 6th week maybe I felt really good coming back. I'm not sure exactly the days and games, but feeling like really great. And then over the past several games, the ball's coming out of my hand great, feel really good, and really confident. So my mind's not wavering. Everybody wants to talk about this or that. I'm not going to let it waver in my mind and my mindset and what I know what I'm going to do and how I can go about my business.
Brady.
Excuse me, Russ, with the opponent this week, I think a lot of people are going to wonder back at what happened this past offseason and the trade discussions with the Bears. I'm wondering where your head was at when all that was going down, and how close, as far as was that to happening?
Listen, I'm focusing right here. The best thing I can do is focus on today. Today is the only day I get, and with everything going on in the world and everything else, and being appreciative of this game and everything, that's my responsibility today. And just loving the process. I love this team. I love the guys on this team. I love everything about it. And what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the respect of the game and knowing how to play and trying to get as good as we can possibly get. It hasn't been an easy season. There's been a lot of tough stuff along the way. We felt like we could have had a hotter start early on, and things happen, and we should have won some games early. And then obviously finger gets hurt and everything else happens, and so we are where we are right now. And I'm gonna put my 2 feet on the ground and give everything that I have every day, and that's all I know. And so I think that's where my focus is at, Brady. Just to be honest with you, it's just really enjoying every day. Enjoying this process, even though it's hard, even though it's tough, even though it's not where I think that we could be. And I think our team as well. But it is where we are, and so what we're going to do is, I'm going to lead with everything I have every day. And one of my favorite scriptures is Matthew 6:34. Don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow has enough worries in itself. And so I'm going to give everything I got today, and that's where my head is.
And what happened with your ankle, and how's it feeling right now?
Yeah, I got smashed up a little bit on one of the sacks. Just the guy landed on it pretty good. So I'm feeling good. Trying to get better every day with it. Working 24/7 around the clock. With it. Obviously, a short week, being the game moved on Tuesday. Just getting back. Getting after it. Was that walkthrough and practice today, and practicing everything else. So feeling good.
Thanks, Russ.
Yep. Thank you.
Michael Sean.
Hey, Russ, how much of the offense through 14 weeks looks like the offense you imagined when you heard that Shane had got hired?
Listen, that's a good question, but I think that a lot of it's hasn't looked the way we wanted to, just because of the things that have happened. Obviously, not having Chris Carson. Obviously, me getting dinged up and not being able to be in there and catch the mojo that we felt like we were having. I think about my first however many games before I got injured. I felt like I was playing some of the best football of my career so far, and so zoned in. Obviously, you come back and you find that rhythm and all that, which we've been able to find over the past few weeks, and and obviously we played a really good football team on Tuesday. But I think that a lot of it's in terms of what we could do in terms of tempo. We've done some of that. We've done some of it really well when we do it. Obviously you think about the 2-minute drives and things we've done, and when we hop into it, we do a great job of it. I think the run game stuff has been pretty good as of late, and we've done some really good stuff there. And I think that we have a good mixture of stuff. I think the biggest thing that we have to do is continue to stay the course, and I think continue to learn as much as we can learn, get as good as we can possibly get in these next 3 weeks.
One more real quick. Your numbers are kind of down rushing, yours personally, I mean, whether scrambles or just design stuff. Is that on purpose?
No, I think that no, nothing on purpose. I think you just play the game, and I'm always ready to move when I need to. I think about we picked up some huge first downs in the Houston game on third downs and stuff like that, and so it's not that I'm not looking to run or anything like that. Just when it's there, I take it, and if not, then try to find another play.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, 2 more. Bob.
Yeah, Russell, one more on Jimmy Graham. He had
Mhm.
such high expectations when he got traded here. Did you ever feel like that bothered him at all? And did you feel like maybe it was unfair that, people put such high expectations on him in terms of what they thought he was going to do?
I think, with Jimmy, unfortunately he had 2 major injuries, that was really tough, significant injuries that he fought his butt off to get back, with, I think there's a patellar tendon or whatever, and maybe one other, maybe did it twice, right? Is that right? I think so. So, I think that with Jimmy, I think that when we did catch fire, he ended up, people forget that he scored 10 touchdowns in 1 year, and he had a pretty good, we kind of caught fire there pretty quickly, and then obviously he ended up going a different direction, but I think that when he was healthy and when we were really getting going, there were some special things that we were able to do, and just the energy he brought to the field and how he would get to the end zone and just spike the ball, get a first down. I think about certain moments where he would just snag the ball off the guys' heads, or I'd throw him one across the seam and he'd stiff arm somebody and ran across all the way to the end zone. He made some very special plays for us, and I think that unfortunately the injuries kind of delayed a little of the timing and the flow, but when we were able to get back and really spend that time out in the field together, I thought it became pretty magical with those 10 touchdowns that we caught that 1 year. So I think that more time could have been, if we had more time together, it could have been even more special and everything else without the injuries.
Jackie.
Hey Russ, the Pro Bowl rosters was announced last night, and just your thoughts on being named an alternate, and then also Wags and Quandre being named for the defense.
Well, I think anytime you get a Pro Bowl opportunity, it's always special. I think that what's really amazing is when you think about guys like Quandre Diggs, Q Diggs, you think about Bobby Wagner. These guys have been the best in the business. Bobby in particular has been so magnificent over 10 years. He's best in the game, arguably maybe the best to ever play the position, in my opinion. So I think about a guy like Q Diggs. Ever since he's stepped ground in this facility, he has been a tremendous leader. He's been an amazing teammate, amazing friend. He's just inspiration. Just to watch how he works every day and how he brings it. There's so many other guys. Obviously, Michael Dixon what he's been able to do, and I think that he should definitely be in there with what he's been able to do. But Nick Bellore has had an amazing year. There's so many special players on our football team, and as we know, this season has been tough. For some of those moments and accolades and all that stuff. But to any time, those guys they should get rewarded for that, for all the hard work they've put into it and everything else. So it's a special thing to see that. And Q Diggs has had an amazing career with us so far, and obviously Bobby too as well, and the rest of the guys.
All right, last one, Greg.
Following up on the Graham trade, how different, Russ, was it when Max Unger left? How different was it for you in the offense post Max Unger?
Well, I think Max was one of the best centers in the game. Obviously, and I think we had guys step in, and we kind of shuffled some centers around and this and that, and which is a very important position. I think that Justin Britt ended up stepping in there and doing a great job with it over time, and then obviously now Ethan is running with it. I think Max was so professional every day. He brought everything to the table. He was an absolute star at the position. And I think Jimmy was really special for us too. He was, like I said, he scored 10 touchdowns in 1 year. Did so many great things in this community, and both of those guys were amazing community people and guys who really cared. And so I was fortunate to be able to play with an incredible talent in Max Unger, and an incredible talent with Jimmy Graham. And so both of those, and that's the thing about sports. It's a constant change and constant movement and everything else. And so you may get close to one guy and play with one guy for a long time, and then another guy moves or whatever it may be. But those guys were ultimate pros and amazing at what they did.
Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all. If I don't get to see you guys, Merry Christmas to you all. Happy holidays. Go Hawks. Appreciate y'all.
Well.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.